All right. So, one of my least favorite people in history is Adolf Hitler. And my favorite hero of modern times is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Um, when it comes to the way that I speak, when I'm trying to get people to listen, to understand, the two people whose speeches that I studied, remember some videos past, I was explaining to you that I learned how to speak and make facial expressions when I speak by looking in the mirror, which is similar to like here, I look at my in between my eyes right here and I watch the proportions and the movement, and I can look myself in the eye just fine in these videos or in the mirror. It's not an issue. There are very few people that I can look in the eye and not feel intimidated and not feel like I have to look at the ground. With Alicia Bollinger, it was always a looking at the ground thing. With Natalie, when she rescued me, I could look her in the eyes. She was one of the very few people I could do that with. I couldn't even do that with Jamie. I can do it with her son. I could look him in the eye. Jamie was real pissed off at a lot of people in her son's life because she's on being completely honest with him. And while I was up there, she realized that that whole honesty thing may not be exactly what she wanted for him, because the whole loose lips sink ships thing. You let your son know everything, but you don't let him know how much trouble that you get into if he blabs his mouth. And then she ended up having to explain that to him in a convenience store because he was talking about marijuana. Damn. That's because she had a THC pen at her place, and she was paranoid that the cops might hear about it from somebody in this store in South Dakota, getting all paranoid because there's this little boy talking about marijuana in the fucking quick place. But this is about making a connection with the police, isn't it? It really is. No, these are not good cops if they're not turning in the bad cops. But that doesn't mean that they're bad people. Just because they have a badge and a gun doesn't mean that they don't get legitimately afraid of their coworkers who have badges and guns. It doesn't mean that they're not going to do the wrong shit that you do when somebody in your family does something fucked up. My family threw me away years ago because I had a choice between having them harm me for the rest of my life because of their addictions, or moving on and finding positive people. And I found that. I found Boulder, Colorado, where it was okay to be me. It was okay to be positive. It was okay to be weird and different. Except cops and to CU students, because you're homeless. A lot of them kids, they go to school in CU. You got a bunch of the prettiest white girls in every little Midwest town that, you know, she was probably the prom queen or the prettiest girl in her town, but she gets to that big city and it's pretty much all about trying to get her drunk so they can have sex with her. And that's pretty much the college. And if those college kids don't get to go have sex with the girl that they want, or the girl that they want to have sex with is off having sex with somebody else. Like one dude, while he was beating up a homeless dude, he was explaining to the dude that he's beating up this homeless guy because he just heard his girlfriend, and this girl wasn't his girlfriend, obviously, getting ravaged like a dog in the bathroom and enjoying the hell out of it. So, obviously, he doesn't have a girlfriend anymore. He's got a lot of pent up sexual energy. He's got a lot of alcohol in his system, and he just wants somebody to take it out on. Meanwhile, he's being pretty fucking honest because he's that drunk. Now, when you look at the cops and you see those cops who are, well, they're not bad people, but they're not doing anything about the bad cops. They see the bad cops, like Officer Keith Steinman, and Al and Lolatai, rewarded for their illegal activities, rewarded for their literal terrorism, for abusing their power, for harming the innocent. And instead of speaking out because they are too afraid, they eventually give in and become a greater part of the issue. Through all of this, there's been a bunch from people like Barton Niemöller. Matter of fact, I'm going to read something from a man who, on December 28th, just before I got that telephone call saying that Natalie Bollinger was missing, on the 28th of December of 2017, I was trying to help find this man for his mother, Mandy Singer. The conversation with her is on here. Her and her son are both involved in helping to find missing and murdered Indigenous women. They also understand homelessness. They also understand addiction. They understand physical abuse, sexual abuse. Mandy's even been abused by somebody in law enforcement or in the criminal justice field who's related to her. Let's see. I'm looking up his profile right now because I'm live streaming. It doesn't really stay connected. So opening up an extra page might not be the most positive thing. Mutual friends. She's friends with a lot of my witnesses. As I look on here, there's a bunch of people that threw me away. But the one that I'm looking for is her son, and that way I can find his stuff the easiest. Otherwise, I'll have to scroll through a whole bunch in order to find it. She's friends with a lot of other victims, too. Holy shit, she's friends with a lot of victims. She might not be friends with her son anymore. I guess I'll have to do it the old-fashioned way. Actually, no, I won't. I can look it up in the search bar. It's frozen up, though. I'm sorry, folks. I'm trying to do the best that I can, and I know this is taking some time. Please bear with me. That's what sucks about forgetting people's names so easily. I just had his name on the end of my tongue. And it's being slow as shit. I'm not actually trying to find him in specific. There's things that he typed that I'm trying to find. It's a whole bunch of quotes from a lot of different people. That's just weird. Ah, here it is. I found it. All right, Ryan Wilkinson Jr. Never stay silent. The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look and do nothing. Albert Einstein. He who does not oppose evil commands it to be done. Leonardo da Vinci. What you allow, you encourage. Carrie Hines Musgrove. Your silence is consent. Plato. If you're neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Desmond Tutu. Silence in the face of injustice is complicity with the oppressor. Jeanette Segan. Standing up to bullies is the hallmark of a civilized society. Robert Reich. One does not have to operate with great malice to do great harm. The absence of empathy and absence of understanding are sufficient. Charles M. Blow. This is all of the issues that I have been having since day one. The things that he's quoting these people as, these are all actual truths in my situation and in many of these situations. Black Lives Matters needs your help, but you also need theirs. You need to understand that. Divided, we are conquered. Let's see. I swore never to be silent whenever and wherever humans endure suffering and humiliation. We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the torment, never the tormented. Elie Wiesel. I'm going to do something that annoys me. I'm going to read that again. This is for you, Katie Cahill. This is for you, Shannon Alvarado. This is for you, Kayla Trujillo. This is for you, Laura Nelson. This is for you, Landline and Amanda Engeline. I swore never to be silent whenever and wherever humans endure suffering and humiliation. We must always take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the torment. Elie Wiesel. There may be times when we are powerless to prevent injustice, but there must never be a time when we fail to protest it. Elie Wiesel. You think that your silence on certain topics, perhaps in the face of injustice or unkindness or mean-spiritedness, causes others to reserve judgment of you. Far otherwise. Your silence utters very loud. You have no oracle to speak, no wisdom to offer, and your fellow people have learned that you cannot help them. Doth wisdom cry and understanding put forth her voice? We should be well, or we would be well to do likewise. Ralph Waldo Emerson. This one is from my favorite hero of the 20th century. A man who was stabbed repeatedly for speaking up. A man who was shot more than once for speaking up. A man beaten down by police and the public for speaking up. A man who was falsely imprisoned, wrongly imprisoned, and imprisoned for unjust laws for speaking up. I know about all of those. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and I have a lot in common. Now, albeit I have never been actually shot, I've been stabbed, I've been beaten, I've been falsely imprisoned by the police and by the public. because it's unpopular to like a homeless person or somebody considered mentally ill or to take their side. Just like back then, it was unpopular to take the side of black people who were being oppressed, same as today. We want to pretend that that was all behind us. It's not. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Martin Luther King Jr. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Martin Luther King Jr. There are times when silence becomes an accomplice to injustice. Ayaan Hirsi Ali. I chose to defend human rights because I cannot maintain my silence in the face of injustice. Chang Guangcheng. The more you answer the injustice of others, the more you heal your own soul. Julia Post. If you are silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. Zora Neale Hurston. So far, all things that I've had to endure. All things that I understand all painfully too well. Real love cannot be silent in the face of injustice. Mel White, all of you who told me that you loved me, every one of you, from Natalie to Alicia to Maddie to Brandon to Veronica to Lana and Amanda and Miss Jerry. I understand you're afraid, but if you loved me, you would have stood up and together we could have done something. But each one of you promising me that you're going to help it, and each one of you not working together with the others or finding out what actually happened or what's actually going on. You want to tell me how to think and feel. That would be like me telling black people, you know, you should just ignore it. That is literally the advice that I get. You know, if you black people just loved yourselves. Yes, that's the advice that I get. Sounds a lot different when you tell somebody who's black to do that, don't it? If Mr. Floyd had loved himself, would that have stopped that officer from killing him? Fuck you. So stow your fucking ignorance and your bullshit. All right, I just clicked onto this to read a couple of comments, and I'll be back to do that, but I want to finish these. I always wondered why somebody doesn't do something about that. Then I realized I was somebody. People say, Sean, you just need to worry about yourself. And then they say, you need to go to the back of the bus because we're worried about black people, right? We need your help with this whole black people situation. We need to get black people rights. We need to get the police to stop killing black people. And I'm like, I got 300 deep in the ground. All right. I am 300 corpses in the ground right now with people that I personally fucking know. Don't tell me about black people. Don't tell me to go to the back of the goddamn bus. 300 fucking corpses deep. You want to tell me about your homie you lost in 98? Holy fucking goddamn, what's wrong with you people? And I don't mean you people as in you black people or as in you white people. I mean you fucking people, every goddamn one of you. And myself and well, for Christ's fucking sake. But at least I'm doing something about it. At least I'm speaking up. And I did everything that I could within my power to try to force a fucking court date. Meanwhile, for doing the right thing in these situations, I got victimized. I had to see other people victimized. And for doing the right thing and speaking up, other people were victimized further. Victims were stuck in the situations where they were being victimized because I'm treated like I'm mentally ill. These people need help. They're not telling me these things just to tell me them. They're telling me them because they're still enduring them and they need help. Like Anna Hunka, she's dead now, by the way. Thank you very fucking much, Boulder Police Department, for the 18 fucking bodies. 18 bodies since Natalie disappeared. Or in that area of time. See, the first one in that whole run-up of fucking corpses wasn't even Natalie Bollinger. It was Benjamin fucking Harvey, who froze to death because he didn't want to have to spend $400 and 60 hours of community service for having a fucking blanket. So he fucking froze to death on Christmas fucking Day. I knew that man personally. And this is the shit that I was going through that sent me over the fucking edge. The same shit that I was going through when I was in Virginia in 2016. But these people don't matter, do they? If I say these people's lives mattered, then it makes me a racist, doesn't it? If I say that their lives mattered, and I'm not going to shut up about it, that's like calling you the N-word, isn't it? You ignorant fuck! You racist piece of shit! You want to talk about how bad it is for black people? You don't know shit! I always wondered why somebody doesn't do something about that. Then I realized I was somebody. Lily Tomlin. It takes a village to raise a child, and it also takes a village to allow the abuse of one unknown. Yeah, the whole village can hear daddy raping his daughter, but they don't do a goddamn thing about it. Or pretend that he must have gotten a new girlfriend. Meanwhile, it's a small fucking village. That's the United States of America, people. That is the United States of America. I will not pledge allegiance to the flag. Now, I'm going to recite for you the words. They are meaningless words. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yes, I grew up in the fucking 80s. We had the Pledge of Allegiance. That flag don't mean shit without the Constitution. It is toilet paper. You didn't do a goddamn thing about our government using the Constitution as toilet paper and literally killing innocent people in doing so. And you want to be pissed off that the people who have their loved ones being killed every day wipe their ass with that fucking flag? If you care more about things than people, you are not a human being to me. As you grow older, you will discover that you have two hands, one for helping yourself and one for helping others. Audrey Hepburn. The first step in the evolution of ethics is a sense of solidarity with other human beings. Albert Schweitzer. What does it mean to hold space for someone else? It means that we are willing to walk alongside another person in whatever journey they're on without judging them, making them feel inadequate, trying to fix them, or trying to impact the outcome. When we hold space for other people, we open our hearts, offer unconditional support, and let go of judgment and control. Heather Platt. Remember, oppression thrives in isolation. Connection is the only thing that can save you. Remember, oppression thrives on superficiality. Honesty about your struggle is the key to your liberation. Remember, your story can help save someone's life. Your silence contributes to someone else's struggle. Speak so we can all be free. Love so we can all be liberated. The moment is now. We need you. Yolo Akili. It is precisely because of my love for humanity that I get enraged at systems that prevent people from flourishing and being free. It's frustrating to see my righteous anger at unjust systems misrepresented as hatred for individuals, but it's more frustrating to see the oppressed suffer while those maladjusted to injustice remain silent. I won't be silent. Silence is violence. Niall Fort. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, for I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out, for I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, for I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Martin Niemöller. Have you ever wondered what you would do during the civil rights movement? Stop wondering. It is the civil rights movement. What are you doing? Chris Savage. And I got one more for you. This one's a Sean Schwartz original. You say that your hands are tied. They're not tied. You're holding on to the rope, and there are people dangling at the other end of that rope. Let it go. You have one fucking life to make a difference. One. I am not going to allow Natalie's death to go to waste. I will not allow her predators and mine to get away with it, to continue to go out and victimize others just because you don't want to listen. Those 5 homeless people who were murdered for looking like me. Natalie Bollinger. They're dead. What about Anna Hunka? Dead. Ben Harvey? Dead. What about Clearview? Tibor Hate? And a woman who apparently has no name. Both dead. All of those people would be alive if people had listened to me. And that's not all. See, the police could have done something beforehand. And people keep telling me, oh, well, you know, with what the police had, I completely understand why they treated you the way that they did. The fact is that if the police had documented shit before or after, and Scott DaCosta here admitted that his officer, Jordan Anderson, did not do his job. But he also protected Jordan Anderson and tried to hide that fact. And so did 2 of Jordan Anderson's fellow officers. And Sheriff Scott DaCosta tried to hide that fact. Dreamers dream and builders build, but it takes an artist to bridge the gap. Lucky me, I'm all 3. I am a dreamer. I'm also a builder. I learn how other people build things so that I can build the things that I want. Most of the things that I want are literally thousands of years old. Thousands of years old. Basically, I want a dirt wall around my fucking garden. That's what I want. A dirt wall around my garden where I can allow my loved ones to come see me whenever they want. Where I can serve them. See, my idea of a castle isn't some big European fucking stone giant. It's a Roman marching fort. Just leave it in place. Instead of arming yourselves with weapons, you arm yourselves with a plow. You arm yourselves with a hoe. You arm yourself with some seeds. You arm yourself with some fucking love, for Christ's sake. See, as pissed off as I am at Alicia Bollinger, she did say something that really is important to all this. She said, Sean, all you need is love. John Lennon, right there. Sean, her exact words were, Sean, you just need to be loved. And she was right. But the lies that her and her sister told, the narrative that they tried to sell people, resulted in me not being able to see my loved ones, resulted in me being harmed when I went to see my loved ones. Whether that was their intent or not, that was the result. And when I told them that that was the result and that I was being harmed, they started playing victim. As if I was a terrible person for saying, hey, people are harming me for shit that I didn't do. They're doing terrible things because you're pretty. Natalie and I had that conversation. Natalie, myself, and Alicia had that conversation on Virginia Beach while I was there. While I was holding Natalie's hand, and Alicia had her arms wrapped around her sister, and those two drunk guys were being a pain in the ass. We were friends. And when they wanted to take me having a panic attack, being severely dehydrated, stuck in the fucking road with a fucked up phone that they gave me, with no support network and no money, when they wanted to take that in the worst possible way that they fucking could, and outright lie to people about the situation and what happened. Look at what I have had to go through all of this. And people tell me I need to look at their point of view. I did. That is what I do. I've been in enough fucked up situations that I am paranoid, but I know what to be paranoid of. But you don't want to pay no mind to that. My experiences must not exist because I'm white. They must be artificial experiences because you call me mentally ill. I must just be imagining the things that I posted up in these videos. Those are obviously, I must be schizophrenic, and those videos don't actually exist. I just believe that they do because I'm schizophrenic and I'm talking to Jesus who's telling me to go kill people. No, I'm not schizophrenic, and Jesus isn't telling me to go kill people. Oh. Now, it's understandable why I would choose Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as a model for my speaking. But a lot of you are probably like, why Adolf Hitler? Because he was a powerful speaker, duh. Yeah, he was a fucking crooked piece of shit who did a lot of terrible things. But the reason people listened to him is because he knew how to speak. Something that I've been working on. I've also read 2 or 3 books that you might not imagine somebody like me who's into human rights would read. I have read Mein Kampf. And I'm not the only person who has read it. I happen to know children of people who have been my friends for years who have read Mein Kampf, and they read it for the same reason that I did. The hell was going through this goddamn lunatic's mind? And then you start reading through it. Some of the stuff that he had to say, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself said. John F. Kennedy said. Henry Ford said. Yeah, he used a lot of good ideas to manipulate people. Oh, yes, here are my political promises. I'm going to promise you this, but not deliver. You already know that you can't deliver those promises. You already know that. You are lying to the American people every time that you do that. You know that the way that the system works isn't going to allow you to do that, and you outright lie for votes. Ew. Anyway, Panda 3000 type hi, I am back. There was a fantastic thunderstorm coming over my town, but unfortunately it turned around before it reached me. They're rare where I live and exciting. Oh my God, we have them in Chapel, Nebraska. A few years ago when I came back to Chapel and I first started talking to Amy and her boyfriend, this is like, after the Natalie situation, and I haven't seen them in a while. And they had a lot of shit going on, but I hung out on the porch with them and watched chain lightning go around this town. We have chain lightning here. Chapel is a very unique thermal draw. There's 3 opening passes in the mountains here through the Rockies that separate the west and the east here. There's a mountain range on the west side, that's the Rockies, and the mountain range on the east side is the Ozarks. Is that right? No, I think the Ozarks is the regional portion of the mountain range on the east coast, but I'm not for certain. Anyway, those 3 different places, they basically come in here and they make a big swirly like a flushing toilet over Chapel, Nebraska. We have had many occasions where there is sunshine everywhere around us. Julesburg, Colorado, Garden County, Colorado, Lodgepole, Nebraska. All of these places all surrounding us. We can see blue skies in all of them, and we have hail and rain and snowstorms, all depending on which time of the year it is, hanging out over Chapel, Nebraska. And there are other times where we are completely surrounded by clouds all the way around, and everybody is getting lightning, and everybody is getting thunderstorms, and people are getting rains that are knocking all of the crops off of the fucking stalks and destroying farmers' crops. And here in Chapel, Nebraska, it's bright and sunshiny. I love thunderstorms. And we have some of the best in the world. There are 2 things in Nebraska that I love more than Colorado and more than most of the places that I've been, because it's so flat, so incredibly flat. You can see for a long ways. The thunderstorms here in Chapel, Nebraska are the best. We may not get them as frequently as some other places, but we get a lot of them, especially during this time of year. And chasing tornadoes is so much fun. Me and Brandon Jeffson drove through a cloud one day, a cloud that was sitting on the ground. And we got to see the tornado come down and pick up almost a mile circumference worth of this cloud. This cloud was so dense that when we were going into the dips in the road, it was going halfway up the windshield, and we couldn't see anything on the bottom half of the windshield and couldn't see much above it. Then when we got on the top of the hill, everything was completely clear, and we ran into Jeremiah Morgan out on the cutoff to his farm about 8 miles north. And he was leaning out of his truck doing the same thing we were, checking out them clouds and enjoying that tornado. My great-grandfather was black. His father was an ex-slave who came to England. My mother's maiden name isn't Stewart because she's Scottish. It's Stewart because her fathers were slaves named Inglis. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. My first ancestors in this country were slaves too. Depends on who you listen to the story of. My dad doesn't like black people very much, so he's not going to tell the story either way. The people in my family that told me that, though, were from the Schwartz side of the family. My grandma Schwartz was also part black. But that's not important. It really doesn't. I'm white enough that I do get white privilege, and yes, white privilege does exist. If I'd have been black, I'd have just been shot when Natalie was killed. Or they'd have just railroaded me right from the very beginning. But they had to be mindful of it because I'd been speaking out against police and their brutality for years, and the whole mentally ill thing. My ancestors, here's one that it doesn't let me see, so I just put it up there. Here's another one I can show. Wow, there's a lot of typing from Panda 3000. I'm sorry, I was reading from my Facebook, so I didn't see most of these. My ancestors got named things like Danny Stewart and Mustard Stewart because their slave masters decided. My parents are cousins through genetics. I ended up being white, but having a blonde afro, and my brother was dark skinned with straight hair. Yep. Luckily, you're less likely to get genetic defects from either side because you're mixed. A lot of people want to talk shit about people who are mixed breeds, and this, that, and the other, and how they're pure blood. Pure blood just means you're inbred, and that's fucking gross. I don't care who you are. It doesn't matter if you're a horse, a dog, or a human being. Inbreeding is just nasty. You're welcome for saying that. I had another coffee that I'm trying to find, and I'm sorry about that. The first time I experienced I had of racism was when my class teacher, when I was 7, got everyone together, our siblings, out of the nursery for group photos. And when I got my brother, they said no. They told me I was lying because my brother has different skin to me. They pushed at that on a 7-year-old kid and a toddler until the head teacher who knew my family history stepped in. And see, that's why it's important to have somebody there in person. They're in person who knows you to speak up for you in that situation. Panda 3000, I totally get that. Panda 3000 type, my hands are not tied. I get interested when people try to talk racist shit to me because I can bring up my history. They get hella arquard when they realize that must be a British word. If you could explain that to me, that'd be great. If I'm wrong about that or it's a typo, let me know. I'm not trying to be ignorant and I'm not trying to be an asshole. When they realized my black relatives 100 years ago were in the very town we're in now and were respected members of the community. Oh, yeah. Here in the United States, most of our Navy, to begin with, all the way through to the War of 1812, were mostly black people. It's a true story. The Battle of Lake Erie, mostly black people under Admiral Perry. And then she typed, or he, I don't know which, damn it, how are you so insightful but not seen? Swords to plowshares. Yes, I actually had and it's still on it. There's a Facebook group that I started called Trash Treasures and Airplane Enthusiasts. And in it, there was a big part of it that I called Swords to Plowshares, where I was investigating military technology like RPGs and Cobra attack helicopter and looking at alternative uses, civilian uses, stuff that's better. Like they used the AH-1G Cobra, that's the Vietnam version, for Firewatch. Instead of having the machine mount or the turret mounted machine guns, that turret instead has infrared markers and they're able to tell, heat and thermal imaging and find hot spots where the firemen might not be able to see it on the ground, but it's a place that could possibly flare up. And they can actually direct the firefighters on the ground to the hot spot. The story you tell is my worst fear. I am autistic, depressed, have anxiety, and PTSD. See, that's the thing for many of these parents. Like, for example, there's a lady named Summer who has an autistic child, and she's afraid of that. With Laura Nelson, she's got an autistic child, and she's afraid of these exact same things. There's a lady in town who has a son who's autistic that's a little bit older, and I'm not going to tell you her name because it's not your goddamn business, and I don't think her son is 18 yet, and she hasn't brought him up in any of the situations, so it's not my place to bring it up. But nearly all parents of autistic children fear this. Some parents try to remedy it by getting educated and helping their child to prepare for that. And those are good parents. And then there are the parents who assume their kid is retarded and try to assume complete control over their child once they turn 18. And no, you aren't making good decisions because you aren't understanding. So when I turn 18, yeah, you need to get the fuck out of my life. Um, and that's actually how it was with my parents. When I was 18, that was a signal to me that I no longer had to endure that abuse, which is great news. Oh, for fuck's sake, please, for the sake of publicity, keep away from Hitler. He may have been good at PR, but this worldview was shit. You're absolutely right about that. Myself and the other people that I know who have read his book, we all very much have the same point of view as you. Stay away from Hitler. The problem is, there's still plenty to learn from Hitler. There's still plenty to learn from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. There's still plenty to learn from Nikola Tesla. If you can't learn from other people's mistakes, you got some major issues. Donald Trump, his speaking abilities, is that more Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. or is that more Hitler? It's actually neither. It's just rambling. And I know I do a lot of rambling. He doesn't think before he speaks, and he does have connection issues between his brain and his mouth, like I do. The more flustered he gets, the more likely stupid is going to come out of his mouth. Difference between me and that sorry son of a bitch. Train is that he doesn't have a goddamn clue. I mean, seriously. How is someone who can get $1 million loan from their daddy, how they got anything in common with me? How are they going to make decisions for my life as if they know? What the fuck is the hole in your place that is letting a circle of sunshine on your face? All right, so this is a horse trailer, right? On this side is what used to be a green window. It's not green though, at least it doesn't look that way here, and it's been sun faded. It was see-through when it was originally made, but it's also been sun baked, so it's basically crystallized because it's plastic, and it's the wrong kind of plastic to do that with, and you just can't see through it, so it ends up being kind of like a frosted skylight. This one right here is completely open, and this right here, this part in the very front here that I'm sitting in, this ledge that you see all the way around me, usually holds something that you can put food and water and stuff in there for your horses or your cattle or whatever, and that actually helps to get them in here. And a lot of times, the way that you get a horse or a cow to come in here is you have somebody open this front door right here that I'm using for a breeze, and you have them put some food in there, and they go in there trying to get the food. That's what the light is. My black ancestors were important members for things like tailors in the 1800s. People now think in the past black people were just excluded. They weren't. Look up black people in Roman Europe. Exactly. Look up black people in Greek society. Look up how many black emperors there were. There were two, by the way. So you don't actually have to look that up, but I would recommend it. It's a good read. A lot of things that people don't realize is that England actually made slavery illegal before the United States did. A lot of people don't know that. Um, the whole black people are different thing was only brought up after slavery was a thing. Before it was, Roman UK was pretty diverse. And you're absolutely right about that. I love learning about Hadrian's Wall. That's the defensive fortification between Scotland and England and also Wales. Now, there was the Antonine Wall, and it's kind of famous too, but it wasn't built of stone. It was mostly the Ninth Legion that built that. Now, each legion along Hadrian's Wall was responsible for building their own section. And Hadrian, he thought of himself as quite the architect. Um, they also had what's called mile forts. A mile fort was basically just a gatehouse from north to south. It had a little short area that you would light a fire on, and the next person a mile down, if there was something going on, people could tell which direction the problem was coming from based on which direction the fire came from. If you're facing north and the fire came from your right, you light your signal fire. The next guy to your left is going to light his signal fire. But you saw the signal fire to your right, so you know to go right with your enemy. There was a road built behind Hadrian's Wall so that it was easy to travel. And it was just far enough away from Hadrian's Wall to be out of arrow range if the Bertonculi, those nasty little Brits, were on top of the wall firing with their best archers. Distance was important. I like learning about places like Bath and ancient Londinium. London was named by who? By the Romans. Most of the towns in southern Britain were named by the Romans. And they were renamed by the Saxons, or Saxonized by the Saxons, I should say. But I learned a lot about Roman slavery too. Did you know that in ancient Greece, if you owned a slave and your slave was not healthy, you could be put to death? Did you know that in Roman times there was a certain amount of time that you were allowed to own a slave and you weren't allowed to own them longer than that? In many slave cases, the slaves became Romans and very much loved the Roman Empire. And also, they became friends with the people who owned them. For them, slavery was like a cultural exchange. When they would take hostages, is what they called it, what they were doing was they were taking the young noble lords of other, what they considered barbaric tribes, and bringing them to Rome, teaching them how to build the Roman way, how to fight the Roman way, how to live the Roman way. And hopefully, these people would then be emissaries to their own people with this Roman technology. Oh my God, Chester, yes, absolutely. Oh my God, like the old cavalry barracks that is now a church, or the hippodrome they have there, or the, oh my God, they have so much at Chester. There's also Chester Field, where the largest Roman cavalry legion was actually stationed in Great Britain. They're saying that there could have been up to 1,200 horses there. I missed a whole bunch of reading here, so let me scroll up a little bit. I'm not saying don't mention it. There's a lot to learn from history, but certain words are like bait to stupid people. You're right. Like the term mentally ill is bait to stupid people. A lot of the news and a lot of these places, like if you have listened to Rob Gavigan's thing, I encourage you to listen to Sword and Scale episodes 109 and 110 and see how completely fucked up that situation was. Those of you who I've sent packets of evidence to that have gotten to see what the truth is, well, a lot of that stuff, when I posted it on the internet, despite the fact that I believe the censorship is wrong, oh, sorry. Let me plug it in real quick. You're good. Sorry about that. Called working together. He uses some of my tools, I use some of his, and I'm using his power, and he's using his power cord to work on electrical stuff because he's working right now on improving this property. The man absolutely loves his family, and that is something that I have nothing but the greatest amount of respect for. Um, let's see. Thank you for talking to me. It's rare to find someone who will actually have a conversation. There's a saying, 100 miles in the UK is a long way. 100 years in the USA is a long time. Absolutely. And I love your weather there in the UK, by the way. I've never been there, but I've been in places with it, and I'll take it. Matter of fact, fine Scottish weather that I hear so much about. That actually sounds a lot like paradise to me, although a lot of people like the sun more than that. I'm in an area where pretty much every house is over 150 years old. That isn't even unusual. The UK has a lot more history than the UK. I know you meant to type the US on that last part, so you're good. I can extrapolate that from what you were typing. Actually, the largest ancient city ever found, there's a possibility that it was found in the United States. It was a wooden city, and it was in the Northeast, and they have found post holes. If you guys, I know a lot of y'all in Great Britain watch Time Team, right? You know, when they're looking at the Saxon forts and the Viking forts and stuff like that, they're basically just looking for pottery and shit like that because these people didn't build like the Romans did with stone. So a lot of times they just have to look for imprints in the dirt that are a different color. Now, they had a scientist over in Egypt way back in the day who had a very interesting idea about something that he was digging up. He saw stains in the ground, and as he dug down, he thought, I should have been taking pictures of that. That kind of looks like something. So what he ended up doing is him and his team would dig down half an inch or an inch at a time, figure out all the stuff, and take another photograph. And when they stacked them up, they realized that it was the imprint of something. Now, when we go to China, there's stuff being excavated in China, like ancient chariots, that they can even count the spokes on the wheel. Meanwhile, the chariot's gone. The only thing left is the bronze fittings and discolored dirt. But by wiping away one color of dirt and leaving the other color there, they're able to basically cut out the entire wheel in dirt, the entire axle, the entire frame. And this city that's in the northeast here in the United States, they're saying that pretty much every area over almost 150 square mile area, this is a big area. They found these post holes that indicate that people lived not just in a society, not just in a city, not just collected in an area as a village, but they actually had streets. They actually had rows of housing. They also have proof that there was multiple fires there. And one of the questions they have, that a lot of this they claim is mythology because we want to pretend that Native Americans were not that intelligent and they didn't have cities like that. Well, I want you to take a look at something. I want you to take a look at South and Central America and assume that they're connected to this continent. These are some huge cities built out of stone, and it takes a lot of time to build a big city out of stone. It doesn't take much time at all to build it out of wood. You should go to Chester and York. I think you'd like it. I do like York. That's one of my favorite studies. My favorite is actually Vindolanda, just because of the multiple layers of forts. There's actually, although they only advertise the two separate forts, the two main forts, the third fort, the wooden fort, they have been excavating, they have been documenting. It's just not as interesting as the stone stuff. let's see. In ancient slavery, slavery was, let's see. In ancient slavery, slavery was seen as penance. Once you served your time, you were a citizen with all the rights. That is absolutely 100% correct. But that depends on local and regional. There was, when we talk about the Greeks fighting not against Xerxes, but against his father, the thing about his father is that he did conquer a lot of areas, but most of the places that he conquered, these people were glad that he had taken over because of the brutality of the tribal warfare they had been living in before, and the brutality of rulers who thought that they were great and mighty. Matter of fact, King Xerxes' father had the word "the Great" attached to the beginning of his name for a reason. Darius the Great. Why was that? When he built a giant temple in his main city, he did not build it for himself or for his glory. He did not build it for the people and for their glory. He built it to appease the gods of the nobles and the people. To say, hey, we accept you as a part of our society. The Romans did the same thing with their religion. When they took over an area, they took over the god. They adopted the gods of those region and of that area, except in the case of the Jews who had no god because their god was invisible. The Romans thought this was funny as fuck until they adopted that religion. Haha, your god's invisible. Let's see. If you ever come to the UK, I'd like to meet you. I'm not allowed to leave the United States because I was charged with felony assault against a police officer. Yes, they dropped the charges, but it's on my permanent record. And without the money for a lawyer and a damn good one, that stuff is stuck on my record because we'll have to basically fight through at least 20 to 30 court dates in order to get that far. Because it's not just that court date, all of the stuff that has happened since also contributes to me not being allowed to leave the country. Before Natalie was killed, I could have left the country. Afterwards, they guaranteed that I couldn't even travel out of the state of Colorado. I had to flee the state of Colorado for my own safety, for shit's sake. And I'm really starting to get pissed off because I know for a fact that I did buy another one of these and I can't find it. I got two of them because they was on sale. I've been looking for the second one since I got into this damn thing. And that kind of hurts my back to do that. That's right, I got some OJ and it's more healthier for me. It was part of my school education to learn about this stuff. Fun fact, in the UK we learned basically nothing about the American Revolution because we had about 6 other wars going on at the same time. The UK had a lot of fights going on at that time. That's right, the United States is the only country ever to win independence from Great Britain through battle. Ever. It was also just a footnote in British history where it is a major stepping stone here in the United States. I mean, we got to figure at the time the British were involved with the Indian Empire, not Indian as in North American natives, but actually Indians from India. But also at that time, they were already a world superpower, trading the entire world. They were trading in China. They were trading in North America. They were trading in South America. They had prisons in South America, and so did the French. They had colonies in Africa. I mean, they were all over. And I don't know if they had discovered Australia by then or not. I believe that was Cook. I could be incorrect about that. If it wasn't Captain Cook who found Australia, write down in there what I got wrong. I'm not good with names or dates. Um, Let's see. Fun fact, in between the Revolutionary War in the United States and the War of 1812, the British were taking over American shipping vessels to impress sailors. This is actually what started the revolution, or the War of 1812, was the impressing of American merchant sailors on Admiral Nelson's fleet. Yes, Admiral Horatio Nelson is well loved by the British people and so on and so forth. And yes, it was slavery on board every one of these ships, and up to 60% of his military was pressed into service, but that was the same thing worldwide. So somehow magically it's acceptable and he's a glorified hero. Well, cool. I have studied the HMS Victory as well as the HMS Colossus and a great many old British ships. I just like old wooden boats. I like modern boats too. I like trimarans. I like sailboats. I like outriggers. I just like technology. I like how they do it today and how they did it back then, and I have experience in both, at least to some small degree. So also at the time, let me explain to you why the British were doing this to American shipping. And right after we became a country, the Barbary Corsairs of the Mediterranean, North Africa, did not recognize the United States as a country. And so whenever they ran into an American ship, an American merchant ship, just like the British, they took it over. And they made the people that were on board slaves, or outright killed them, or they sold them to make some money. Ransom. And they would also, of course, get a free ship out of it. And in addition to getting that free ship, they also would change it over to having triangular sails, lateen sails, instead of square sails, which is better for the Mediterranean anyway. It's also better for tacking up wind. And the British, why were they stealing American merchants? Because those Barbary Corsairs of the Algiers coast were doing the same thing to the British they were doing to the Americans, except they weren't coming over to the United States of America and stealing a whole bunch of white people from America and stealing entire towns in America. But they were doing that in Great Britain. There are at least 3 towns in Scotland where one day everybody just up and vanished. And people went, where are all these people going? Well, the Barbary Corsairs of the Algiers coast stole them. Here's a big difference between the soldiers of Queen Anne's War. That's when the British, the French, and the Spanish were all fighting each other. And at the end of the war, the British, French, and Spanish basically threw all of their sailors away. All of these glorious sailors and their wooden walls who had saved Britain basically just didn't mean shit anymore because the war was over. Matter of fact, many of those people on all 3 sides were just simply not going to get paid. They formed the first real democracy in history. The very first true democracy in history was piracy in the Caribbean following Queen Anne's War. Now, Queen Anne's War and the series of shit that came after that goes all the way through the Elizabethan period. I mean, this is basically almost 200 years worth of non-stop battle. A few breaks here and there. If one of these nations was bowed out at the time, the other 2 were still fighting. Or 3 or 4 at the time, because in many cases, for quite a while there, the Dutch were very heavily involved. Their sea trade and sea power was worldwide, and it was greater than the British. Far greater than the British. And it was a grand total of 1 ship built by the British that made all the difference. That made it an arms race between boarding parties and broadsides. Prior to that, it was boarding parties, which the Dutch were very good at, and the British not so much. But then, after the building of that ship and the series of ships that came after it, well, the Dutch adopted the same style of fighting, the same style of movement, the same lineup technique. And that lineup technique was used by nations for quite a while. Matter of fact, Lord Horatio Nelson was the first person for hundreds of years to actually break the line formations. It's the Battle of Trafalgar. Instead of lining up against his cohorts, he decided to split them up by pointing his ships in two rows directly at the enemy broadsides, where the very first two or three ships in each row were just going to get pummeled to hell on the way in. One of those ships was the HMS Victory. And by the end of the battle, the French knew that they had lost. There was no way that they were going to win. The Spanish knew that the battle was already over before it began. Spanish admiral said, "That fool, he doesn't know his job. He just killed us all." And Admiral Horatio Nelson's ships weren't even in cannon range at that point. So the British were the first to break the British tradition. Meanwhile, the majority of their sailors at the time came from where? Ireland. They're from Ireland. Best sailors in the British Empire to this day. Do I personally believe that? It doesn't matter because, well, we've got proof from World War I and World War II and their naval history with their commanders, the most successful ones, most of them were Irishmen who were given shitty positions and weren't supposed to gain any glories. Write that down. All right, what's next? Let's see. Damn, you're a really interesting guy. I can extrapolate that. Interesting guy with a lot of knowledge. I have heard that some of the Native American mummies are older than the Egyptian mummies. That's true. We've got Native American mummies that are 8 to 10,000 years old. They say that Native Americans didn't come here until about 10,000 years ago. And there's a story between, all right, did they really come over the polar ice caps hundreds of thousands of years ago, or did they come from Europe 10,000 years ago? And when it really all comes down to it, we're never going to know. They might have technology later on where they can read the ground and see exactly what's in it and extrapolate some pretty good educated guesses. And that might actually break it all up and allow the next generations to know, but we're not going to find out in our time. A lot of the South American mummies, some of them are between 400 years old and 6,000 years old. Also, the oldest set of iron tools was actually found in Egypt, and it predates this. Now, this makes perfect sense given the fact that it's just one element, and tin, which most of the tin in the world from the Bronze Age, most of it came from Cornwall. I'm not sure if y'all know where Cornwall is, but that's the area where most of it traditionally came from. Even the Chinese, when testing their bronze cannon or their bronze equipment from thousands of years ago, like the first Chinese emperor, Shi Huangdi, that bronze that was used in his burial, the tin from it came from Cornwall. Although there's several places in Great Britain that yield a lot more tin than that. Let's see. The point about the iron tools found in Egypt is that they predate the very first people to be using bronze. These iron tools predate that by about 2,000 years. 2,000 years. You know, the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians who built those pyramids, there is almost twice the distance between the Romans and them as there is between us and the Romans. So by the time the Romans came around, the Egyptians were already ancient. I do not agree with how England acted. It was stupid and imperialistic, very much so. And now America has that mind again. Although we did have a president who had the foresight to decide to abolish American imperialism. We will gain no more land by conquest. We still have, but we find ways around that. Oh, well, technically, they're renting us the land. Technically, the Japanese are letting us trade in Tokyo Bay. But in reality, American warships went in there and blew the fuck out of the place and said, you're going to trade us. Unfortunately, England made decisions based on the London elite, not the rest of the country. That's how it's always been. The elite use propaganda and division to keep us at each other's throats. They always have and they always will. Who is it that benefits from this? Only the elite. By the way, the oldest known brain surgery, or the oldest known survivor of brain surgery, was in Great Britain, and that skull is about 6,000 to 8,000 years old, I believe, but I am probably incorrect about that. This was during the Stone Age, when flint was the most popular tool, and there was a mine in Great Britain that is possibly the largest flint mine ever found. And they have found bodies in there that were crushed by flint shale those thousands of years ago. They've also found skulls of people who had large chunks of their skull taken out, and they can tell that this person survived it because it healed. No, it didn't grow bone over it magically, but the edges where it was sawed, it healed, which means that that person was alive for a period of time, almost a decade, in fact. I live in the Northwest near North Wales. I knew a guy from Wales named Owen Alexander Wayne Giles, and he was a pretty interesting feller. I knew him in Chapel, Nebraska. In our part of the country, Indian and Chinese immigrants settled in most towns to open up takeaway food shops, and people welcomed them. Liverpool was a gateway for diversity in the 1800s and 1900s. Yes, I've been learning about Liverpool a lot. Liverpool was like the British version of Seattle. Liverpool, they actually had bars that were built, specifically built for catching sailors to impress them on naval ships, just like bars in Washington State. You can still go see that part of that history still exists. Those portions of those buildings still exist. They've been renovated on the upper floors, but underneath you get to see where the trap doors are and the mechanisms that opened up. You'd get the sailor drunk, you'd fucking knock the thing out from underneath. The sailor would drop into the fucking basement. Liverpool had stuff like that too. But they were also very heavy into a lot of the trade that was going on, both inland and at sea. I mean, Liverpool was very, very good strategically placed for that. It's kind of like Ostia in Rome. Ostia was perfectly placed for trade between the sea and land. And until the Romans actually made their own portalis or portus, or depending on what dialect you want to use, the great port they built, the hexagonal fort. And it was a fort. A lot of people call it a port, but it wasn't. It had gated walls. You know, it had stuff on the top for siege equipment, for defending the port. If all of that area was saturated with enemy Saxon soldiers, which it wouldn't have been the Saxons at the time, but it's people from that same region that were actually raiding them that they were afraid of at the time. People from the far north of Europe. were actually coming down that far and just going on raids, just like the Hun did. They would go on raids, steal a whole bunch of stuff, and then go home. They're not actually interested in the land, they just want the plunder. So if you defend your navy, they can have the plunder. You can use your navy to go get the plunder back if you need to. And you can use your navy to get other plunder. And you can use that navy to make sure that your people don't starve to death, because the Roman Empire, most of their food came from Egypt in specific, along the Nile River. The same with Alexander the Great. The only reason that Alexander the Great's army or the Roman armies were able to do what it is that they were able to do is specifically because of the grain in Egypt. If it wasn't for that, Alexander the Great and his entire army would have starved to death on their way to Persia. That's how early in the campaign it would have ended. Also, Alexander the Great took it without a fight. The Romans took it without much of a fight. And it was actually that grain that created the great expansion of the Roman Empire. It wasn't actually their legions. Now, although the legions did the fighting and did the warring and later on did most of the decision making, the fact is it was the grain that allowed that. Those soldiers wouldn't have gone anywhere without food. Let's see. The south of the country may have been shit, but the northwest, anyone with skills could make money until the southerners made issue with that. Actually, the northwest of England, Manchester, Warrington, Liverpool. Manchester's another one I'm familiar with. And no, not because of Manchester United. I don't care about football. Okay. Actually, isn't Manchester United a rugby team? I honestly don't know. I'm not saying that to be an asshole or to be condescending. I'm actually ignorant of that. Although I am very familiar with what hooligans are. Actually, the northwest of England, Manchester, Warrington, Liverpool were the first people to have a diverse society. Then the North Welsh. For fuck's sake, if you go on holiday to North Wales, that's holiday for us in the United States is holidays like Easter and Christmas and Thanksgiving. For British people, when they say holiday, that's one of those words like a flat or a flat pack. If they say flat, they're talking about their apartment. If they talk about a flat pack, they're talking about your do-it-yourself shit from IKEA. And if they're talking about holiday, that's a word for vacation. If you go on holiday to North Wales, every small town has a Chinese or Italian restaurant, and these places have 3 generations of history. People around here didn't treat different as bad until media across the whole country happened. Until then, as long as a different person helped the society, they weren't bad. That's how it should be. Anyway, this is an hour and 23 minutes long, and a lot of the stuff that I had planned on going on about, I didn't get to. I was busy reading this and so on and so forth. And no, I'm not blaming you for that. I already know that I will get distracted by it. But this is kind of the closest that I have to positive social interaction at this point. And I want to thank Rob Gavigan for that. A lot of you guys who are, well, we're not talking, but we are at least having an open dialogue, and that's important. Thank you. I'm already having a good day, and it's your fault, Panda. It's nice to know another person's perspective from their side. It's nice to know that we didn't really mean shit in the Revolutionary War as far as the grand scheme of things go in Great Britain, although now it's the UK. One thing is that, you know, a lot of people had long-term enemies. For us, our long-term enemies were Great Britain for a while, and for the French, for about 1,000 years or more, was Britain. So you look at what happened in modern day. Between the War of 1812 and World War One, we went from being enemies with England to rescuing them. Although, if you really want to look at it, America's not what won World War One. What won World War One was the fact that the German people were starving to death and they kicked the Kaiser's ass out of the country. So really, the British didn't win, the French didn't win, the Americans didn't win. Um, Basically, just the people won because the war stopped. The ordinary people never mean shit. The politicians decide. Ordinary people then empathize. My mouth won't work. Ordinary people empathize too much. Actually, I see it differently. Politicians don't empathize enough. They can't. They don't have experiences to draw from that would give them any connection to the people.